before we say anything else, we're going to just say huge spoilers ahead if you have not finished the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. And if you haven't, please go ahead and do that now. Not just for this video, for your own personal fulfillment. So proceed at your own peril if you haven't watched or finished it yet. Now, we knew going into this series that all of the principal characters must not only live, but continue on their predetermined collision course on the Death Star in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. That doesn't mean there weren't going to be some really cool surprises in store for us before all these characters got placed back into the toy box for another 10 years. The transformation of the exceptionally powerful Jedi Master and Clone War General that we once knew as Obi-Wan Kenobi into the quiet, unassuming hermit Ben Kenobi, that was a journey I never knew I needed to take. And now that I've had an opportunity to ride shotgun through that solemn story, it was a slow-burning but ultimately rewarding ride that I will certainly never forget. This is our last call for spoilers, so we're going deep.
We good? We're good? Okay, we're good. Okay. The most difficult part of watching this series was witnessing the complete disconnect from Obi-Wan Kenobi from the Force, and that was really hard for both of us, I think.
Wasn't even sure I was going to enjoy the series after the first couple episodes. I was going to say, after the first
couple episodes, I didn't even know if we were going to like it. But while he was certainly wise to keep a low profile in his new mission and prevent any unwanted Imperial attention, the character we were observing for the first 5 episodes of this series was most certainly not the Obi-Wan Kenobi we had grown to know and love before.
And this wasn't just some incredible act of subterfuge on his part to disguise his true self and his powers. The Obi-Wan Kenobi that we knew was gone, replaced by this broken shell of a man who had lost everything he had ever cared about, loved, or believed in.
His heartbreak and disappointment were evident in every aspect of his mundane daily activities, and as he endured the quiet solitude of his final act of service to the Jedi Order, it was clear that he had not lost touch with the Force. He had willingly just shut himself off from it.
Gone was the wit and the wisdom of a warrior who had stood against battalions of droids without fear. His mischievous sarcasm had been replaced with the vacant stare of a broken man who was simply grinding out his days in hiding. And he wasn't simply hiding from Darth Vader or the Inquisitors. He was hiding from the Force itself and the man that he once was before all this disaster had fallen on him. And the saddest part of all of this was that he didn't stop believing in the Force. He simply didn't want to feel it or connect with it anymore because of the pain that he had endured while serving it. And for many of us, it is this version of Obi-Wan Kenobi that we may relate to the most. Someone who's experienced immeasurable pain, crushing disappointments, and setbacks so massive it seems pointless to continue on. We don't necessarily stop believing, we just disconnect ourselves from the perceived source of what has hurt us. We place our life on autopilot so we don't feel the pain quite so intensely anymore. And sadly, I know this broken version of Obi-Wan Kenobi all too well. He's me.
Watching this previously powerful and confident hero fall to the lowest possible depths of depression and grief was quite frankly difficult to watch.
Sure, Obi-Wan Kenobi's always been my favorite overall character from the Star Wars franchise.
Absolutely.
And while I knew that his retreat from the front lines of battle had to happen for storyline continuity, this was not how I had always imagined it. His self-imposed exile didn't feel like the patient guardianship of the final flicker of hope for the galaxy by a wise and benevolent Jedi Master. It felt like a prison cell of his own making. During this period of time, I had always believed that Obi-Wan was seeking additional wisdom and mastery of the Force. I was not prepared to see the mere shadow of a man that I had known. But his mournful disconnection from the Force that had previously been the source of his strength and giving him purpose in his life is a feeling I believe many of us have experienced. The feeling of being forsaken and abandoned by the very cause we had pledged ourselves to serve. It almost feels blasphemous to say the words forsaken by God. So let's clear the air with a verse that should be moderately familiar to many of us. Matthew 27:46. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?
In the middle of his greatest act of service to the Father, Jesus quoted a portion of Psalm 22, which within its full context may be one of the most depressing and yet relatable portions of Scripture ever written.
The first two verses of this challenging text we'll read together, but the entire chapter is well worth reading if you have the time. Psalm 22, 1 and 2. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me and from the words of my groaning? My God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not hear. In the night season, and I'm not silent. I don't know about you, but I can certainly relate to that feeling. While I'm certainly personally responsible for a great deal of the pain and disappointments I've experienced in my life through my own poor choices, there's also been many times in which I feel like Obi-Wan, broken, defeated, and just methodically going through the motions of life without any feelings of hope or even an encouraging light at the end of the tunnel. And in that place of darkness and internal solitude, I still believe in God. I even still believe that He has a larger plan that will eventually make all these challenging times make sense. And while I will still continue to believe in Him and even serve Him, I feel forsaken. And my method of numbing my pain is similar to Obi-Wan. I cut myself off internally and emotionally from the Lord so that I don't have to continue to reconcile His presence in the world around me with His absence from my painful circumstances. Sure, I continue to believe and follow Him, and perhaps even serve Him from this pocket of hurt, but the joy of my salvation has been buried underneath this cloud of fallen hopes and shattered dreams.
So, how do we go from this emotionally wounded former Jedi Master to the confident Force wielder who reappears with that old sparkle in his eye to take the fight to the Empire once more?
Well, that is the question that the new Obi-Wan Kenobi series finally answers for us, and a lesson we must learn as well.
And in the message to the church at Philadelphia, we find a church that was doing all the right things but was facing unearned persecution regardless.
This church was clicking on all cylinders as a shining example of following Christ. Unlike many of the previous churches who had messages containing warnings or rebukes or corrections, the Church of Philadelphia was praised for their works as well as their steadfast faith in the midst of the battle. This is a group of believers that had remained true to the message and purpose of Christ, but their power and strength was in a microscopic state due to the relentless attacks they had faced. They had stayed strong, they had remained pure, and there was an incredible reward for their perseverance waiting for them on the other side of this battle. But the instruction from the Lord to them for now was just to hold fast.
When our strength is low, the external pressure is high, and our internal doubts are on the rise, the last thing we want to hear from the Lord is, hold on, okay, just hold on. But as we will see in the case of the Church of Philadelphia, as well as the reconnection of Obi-Wan Kenobi to the Force, that is exactly what both of them needed to do.
Obi-Wan's mission would require him to spend almost 20 years in hiding. But what he chose to do during that time, that was up to him. When the time came, he would be the one to set Anakin Skywalker's children on a mission that only they could complete: the fall of the Empire and the eventual repentance and salvation of their fallen father. In the epic lightsaber duel between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader at the conclusion of the final episode in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, we finally got to see Obi-Wan back at full strength, completely reconnected to the Force, in control of the battle, and having defeated his former Padawan yet again in a glorious display of Force mastery.
So, why didn't Obi-Wan end him right there? Or, at least try. Vader was clearly no match for him, and this time Obi-Wan could have finally finished off his rebellious student.
Sure. I don't know. Why does he keep leaving him there when he could just finish him off? Well, the show doesn't explicitly answer this, but I do have my hypothesis. Obi-Wan didn't kill Anakin in that moment because Obi-Wan had finally achieved peace with his journey, and he'd restored his connection to the Force. And the Force had a bigger plan in mind than simply ending the menace that was Darth Vader. Because Vader would one day be the one, the only one, who could finally end Emperor Palpatine's reign of terror. He was the one that threw him down and destroyed him, until he gets resurrected in those horrible movies afterwards. But until that point, he was the one that defeated him. And while we have no way of knowing if Obi-Wan understood the shared destiny that still remained between the two of them, the knowing smile that he flashed in Episode 4 as he gave his life to the Force for the final time showed that not only had Obi-Wan accepted his place in the story, he had finally achieved inner peace with this journey as well. A peace that reminds me of the final words of submission from Christ as he committed his spirit into the hands of a Father who didn't spare him from his path of pain either.
Not because the father was cruel, uncaring, or unconcerned with his child's pain, but because he saw past the pain to a destiny that would provide the only path of salvation for those who would follow him.
And our encouragement to you today is this. Perhaps the painful journey you're currently on is not one of your design. Maybe you, like the church at Philadelphia, remained faithful and you're running on a microscopic level of strength that you feel you can't sustain. And while you've been promised an open door from the Lord, the path that you're on right now feels a lot more like just hold on. And in this place of processing our pain and frustration, we cannot allow ourselves to become disconnected from the Lord, even though our mission may feel a little bit more like a prison. And if we become disconnected through our disillusionment, there is a solution to our sorrow, thanks to one final lesson from Obi-Wan Kenobi.
He only felt isolated because he had chosen to cut himself off from all that he had previously believed in, removing his access to the very comfort he was seeking. As soon as Obi-Wan pressed through to reconnect to the Force, his loneliness was replaced by the presence of a master that had been there all along, just waiting for him to realize it.
We may not get to choose if our destiny involves a long period of seeming exile from our preferred destination, but we do control if we allow that experience to disconnect us from our master. Reconnection to the Lord, no matter how small our strength or faith may feel, is a choice that only we can make. He knows our disappointment. He feels our pain. And if his children are in a fiery furnace of trial and testing, he is absolutely in that fire with us.
His encouragement to the followers at Philadelphia rings true through the ages to us all as well. There is an open door waiting for us at the end of our current struggle that cannot be closed by anyone else. And if we will hold fast to those things that we knew to be true in the light, the darkness cannot overcome us.
If we feel we're in a place where we've been abandoned or forsaken, I have one final encouragement for you as we wrap up this series. The entire book of Revelation was written by the Apostle John, while he was in exile on the Isle of Patmos for his faithfulness to the Lord. Every one of these letters to the churches, all of these prophecies about the end of times, the return of Christ, this all came to John while he was seemingly discarded and forgotten on an island that was intended to be his final prison. As Obi-Wan found, and as John has shown us, even this place of exile may contain the most important mission we will ever receive. So don't lose hope. Even if you find yourself in a dark cave with no obvious exit, you are neither forgotten nor forsaken. You are heard. He is there in the midst of the hurting, and if we're willing to reconnect with him, he will show us that our story is far from over.
As a matter of fact, the very best part may be about to begin, and as Obi-Wan would eventually find a path to reconciliation, as well as the fulfillment of a dream that he had given up on, was waiting for him at his journey's end. The cave that holds our deepest disappointments and represents our greatest disconnection may be the very place that the Lord has chosen for his most profound revelation to be unveiled.